Thank you very much for coming. My name is Evan Wittenberg. I work in the leadership development team at part of Google University. And this is the fourth in our new series called Leading at Google, where we explore different issues of leadership, self, team, and organizational leadership. And I am very excited today to have with us Dr. Srikumar Rao. Dr. Rao is, and there are a lot of his alumni in the audience also. Raise your hand if you've ever been in a course with Dr. Rao. So quite a few people. Thanks for coming. Dr. Rao is currently a visiting professor at the Haas School of Business at Berkeley and also at the London Business School. He's also taught at Columbia Business School. He's a professor of marketing at Long Island University. And his course called Creativity and Personal Mastery is one of the highest rated courses at many of the top business schools in the world. It's actually the only business school course that has an alumni association directly associated with the course. He is here today to talk to us a little bit about some of his ideas from his course and his book, Are You Ready to Succeed?, which some of you were fortunate enough to get. What else should I say, Dr. Rao? First of all, it's his birthday today, so he agreed to come to us on his birthday.
Thank you.
So clapping is really cool, but I've never done this in a group before. Why don't we sing happy birthday? There we go. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Srikumar. Some birthday to you.
Thank you.
So we're going to leave some time at the end of this for questions, and he'll also stick around a little bit past 3 o'clock to answer any questions that you might have. And without further ado, Dr. Rao.
Thank you, Evan. And thank you all for the warm reception. I've never had so many people saying happy birthday to me before. And I'm really, really, really glad to be here at Google because my work is just beginning to be recognized in companies. And a lot of companies are calling me to speak on their locations. But I made a list of which are the companies that I want to work with. And Google happens to be right at the top of that list. So I'm particularly happy that this worked out. So I'm going to be with you for approximately an hour, I guess. And I want you to be prepared. I want you to be open to the possibility that this hour is going to profoundly change your life. Now, every time I make a statement like that to a group like this, I get reactions. Here is a common reaction. This is the reaction I really want to get, but I very rarely get it, and I never get it at financial institutions and investment banks where I speak a lot. So I settle for this. And I'm okay with that. Let me tell you what I do. What I do is I help highly intelligent, deeply driven, fiercely ambitious people find deep meaning. And I have a vision for every one of you, and the vision is that you get up in the morning and your blood is singing at the thought of being who you are and doing what you do. That as you go through the day, there are several moments when you come intensely alive, that you're completely absorbed in what you're doing, that you feel that, yes, you're doing exactly what it is that you were put on the earth to do, and are just vibrantly, radiantly alive. You go to your knees in involuntary gratitude. Thank you, God. So that's my vision for all of you. And if you're there yet, don't answer that question. And what I would like to do is, at the conclusion of our time today, I would like you to, accept that, yes, this is something that I buy into. This is what I would like to have happen to me. And 2, also have the determination that I'm not going to settle for anything less in my life. And if you can accomplish that, then I think that we'll have spent a very profitable hour together. You with me on that? So we'll do that. In my course, and as Evan mentioned, it's the only course that I'm aware of at any business school that has its own alumni association. And numerous people say that this course has profoundly changed their life, and it really does. And I must tell you, to begin with, that there's no ego involved in it, because none of the material that I present, and I'm going to present today, is actually mine. I have borrowed freely from giants, immense spiritual statures, stood the earth at different times, belong to different traditions. And what I've done is taken what they have developed and tested over millennia, and I've basically stripped it of religious and cultural baggage and adapted it so that it's accessible to highly intelligent people in a post-industrial society. So there's no way that this will not work if you do it. All right? Now, before I begin, let me point out to you that profound change is very difficult to bring about. How many of you, at some turning point, and the two most typical turning points are your birthday and New Year's Day, have basically said something like, from now on, things are going to be different. I'm going to eat healthy, exercise regularly, stop procrastinating, catch up on all my backlog. And if you've done that, raise your hands. How long did it last? 2 weeks? There's a reason why exercise clubs sign up so many more members than they can handle at the start of every year. And they do it, with the full confidence that the overcrowding will ease and ease very fast. Profound behavioral change is very difficult to bring about. And if you try to bring it about by an effort of will, you're doing violence to yourself. Odds are extremely good you won't succeed, but even if you do succeed, there will probably be side effects that you're not very happy about. Like you want to stop smoking, and you quit cold turkey, and you eat too much, and you put on weight. Or you decide, okay, I have to lose some weight, so you starve yourself, and you develop a crotchety temper and ruin relations with your boss, your spouse, your children, everybody else. When you try to bring about behavioral change by an effort of will, you do violence to yourself. Odds are you won't succeed. If you do succeed, you'll probably pay a price that you're not happy paying. When people go through my program, they do find that profound behavioral change happens. But this lasts because it doesn't happen by an effort of will. What happens is I have developed a systematic sequence by which you examine what your mental models are. I'll describe what mental models are in just a minute. And as you do that, you change how you look at the world. And as you change how you look at the world, you literally become a different person. As you become a different person, behavioral change is a natural byproduct of that. So that's how it goes. Let's talk about whether what I do and the kinds of issues I deal with are relevant to you or not. So I would like all of you to cooperate with me and be totally honest. So you're going to do that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bunch of situations up on the screen. And when you look at it, if you decide, yes, this is a situation that's relevant to me, I want you to stick your left hand up. Now, don't stick it up tentatively like that. Be a person and stick it right up. All right? So if you find that there's one situation which is relevant to you, if you find that there's a second situation that's relevant to you, stick your right hand up. If you find that there's more than two situations which are relevant to you, stand up. So you're now standing up, going like that. And if you find, by the way, that more than three situations that I put up are relevant for you, I want you to kind of start swaying gently, okay? Evan was actually telling me that you folks don't have enough exercise and could I do something about it? And I said, I'll come up with a creative way of doing it, so that's it. But you've got to be honest. So if it doesn't bear on you, then don't be polite and stand up. But if you find it is relevant, then do stand up, okay? So remember, first left hand, then right hand, then you start swaying. And if there's more than that, kind of go fast, okay? Okay, so let's see how we're doing. Sit down, folks. You know, it's wonderful to see a bunch of managing directors at investment banks going. None of you check emails every 5 minutes, right? So those folks are the kinds of things that I deal with in my course and in my programs, and we've just seen they are hugely relevant to not just people at Google, it's hugely relevant, period, to virtually everybody. And what I'm going to give you is a set of tools. What my program does is give you a set of tools. I can't obviously give all of them to you, but I will share a couple of them. And there are many more in the book that you have, and many of you have obtained it, and I think that the rest of you will obtain it or can obtain it. Let me lay the background. There are some important building blocks that I have to put in place before you can start understanding what I speak about. And the first of these is a concept called mental chatter. Mental chatter is an internal monologue that we have going on in our heads all the time. Begins right up from when you open your eyes in the morning, carries on through the day, is with you right now when you should be listening to me rather than to your mental chatter, and goes on till you go to bed at night, and frequently is so loud that it prevents you from going to sleep. Recognize the kind of thing I'm talking about? Oh, there's the alarm. Should I get up? I don't really want to get up. Let me hit the snooze button. I can get another 10 minutes. Oh, drat, there's that project due today. Why didn't that blank blank expletive deleted, submit what he was supposed to? Why doesn't anybody do what they're supposed to? I get stuck with all of the dirty, unappetizing tasks that have to be done. Should I go to this talk? Will he have anything worthwhile to say? I saw his picture. He's bald. Bald people never have anything interesting to say. Now, that's mental chatter. We have it going on all the time. It's so much a part of our life that we've learned to ignore it. And that is a huge mistake. Because our mental chatter and mental models, I'll get to mental models in just a second, are what we use to create our life. We think that we're given something which is our life, we're given a set of things which is the reality we live with, and that's not true. We construct it, and we construct it using our mental chatter, and a lot of the times what we're doing is we're building it without even knowing that this is what we're doing. So mental chatter is the first thing that you should be aware of. You have it. Frequently, it works against you and is highly dysfunctional. So much about mental chatter. The next thing is mental models. All of us have mental models. And a mental model is a notion we have of along the lines of this is the way the world works. And we've got dozens of mental models, quite possibly hundreds of mental models. We've got mental models about how do I find a date, How do I find someone to get married to? How do I find a job? How do I progress in my job? How do I select a movie to go to? How do I find a friend? How do I make sure my friends like me? You name it, you got a mental model. The problem isn't that we have mental models. Mental models make life very simple in many ways. They're immensely useful, much of the time. Some of the time, they're not. So I repeat, the problem isn't that we have mental models. The problem is that we don't recognize that we have mental models. We think this is the way the world works. And this is not the way the world works. This is our belief that this is the way the world works. And the funny thing about mental models is that the moment you have a mental model and you define this is the way the world works, the universe cooperates and does in fact give you plenty of evidence that that is in fact the way it's working. Every time you find that there is something in your life that is not working, that you're depressed, you're sad, you're angry, frustrated, invariably you can trace it back to one or more mental models you have that are not serving you very well. One of the things that I've got to tell you now, by the way, is don't look at anything I'm saying and ask, is this true? Because I teach in some of the top business schools in the world, and anytime somebody in the front of the classroom makes a statement, very bright people immediately start looking at under what set of circumstances does what he say what he says not true. So I'm going to make life easier for you by telling you up front that everything that I'm going to share with you today is not true, it's false. So you don't have to work on that. I'm telling you up front it's false. You push hard enough, you penetrate deep enough, everything I present to you will crumple. But what you should understand, what you should realize is equally will the models that you are presently using, which you have not subjected to the same scrutiny, they'll crumple too. So the correct question to ask yourself is, don't ask yourself, is this true or false? Don't ask yourself, is this right or wrong? Don't ask yourself, is this good or bad? Ask yourself, does this work for me better in my life today than what I am presently using? Okay? Does it work for me now in my life better than what I'm presently using? And if the answer to that is yes, you accept it, you tinker with it, make it better. And if the answer to that is no, move on. Don't waste your time judging it because you might find it useful at some later point and you don't want to prejudice yourself by judging it. Just move on. Is that fair enough? Okay. So we've covered mental chatter, we've covered mental models, and the third important building block is the me-centered universe. We have a habit, most of us, of living in a me-centered universe. And by living in a me-centered universe, what I mean is we interpret everything that happens to us in terms of what's its impact on me. Our spouse gets a great job offer, and our immediate reaction is, what impact is this going to have on our relationship? Our child drops out of high school and begins to do serious research on the physiological impact of imbibing controlled substances. And our immediate reaction is, what are my friends going to think about my parenting, or what am I going to tell my friends and neighbors? Think about it. How much of the time do you live in a me-centered universe where anything that happens you think of in terms of what's its impact on me? Great deal of it. Well, one of the things that you should be aware of is if you spend the vast majority of your time, if you predominantly live in a me-centered universe, you are guaranteed to find more than your share of frustration, of angst, of pain, of suffering, of life sucks. That's just the way it is. You live in a me-centered universe, this comes with the territory. The only way in which you're going to be able to live a completely fulfilled life is if you arrange it so that you are aligned with doing something which will bring a greater good to a greater community, and you get to define both the greater good and the greater community. But if you do that, you will find that you can live a fulfilled life. As long as you're in a me-centered universe, you're stuck. Might as well accept, pain, frustration, and so on comes with the territory. The good news is that once you recognize it, it's not that difficult to make a shift. And my program have a sequence of steps which will enable you to do that. And I'm going to share some of that with you right now. All right. So now that we've established that, I want you to think about the combination of all of these. And I'm going to make an assertion which probably will strike some of you as very strange, but nevertheless, it's true. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that all of you are living in a dream world. We are all living in the matrix, but we just don't recognize that we're living in a matrix. We think that this is the real world. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an exercise now. It's going to be a very fast exercise. You'll have 10 minutes to do it. What I would like you to do is get up and form a group of 3. Okay? So quick. Everybody on your feet, form a group of 3. You're going to have 10 minutes for this, folks. Yeah? Okay. Okay, folks, now that you've formed a group of 3, here's what you're going to do. In your life, you have something which is of concern to you right now. Around this something which is of concern to you, you have crafted a reality. You say, this is what it is. What you're going to do is articulate that reality to the members, to the other 2 persons in your group. Then what you're going to do with their help is you're going to craft an alternate reality. And there are 2 things about this alternate reality. Number 1, has to be better than the one that you have presently described to yourself. That's a no-brainer. And number 2, it has to be something that you can plausibly believe. In other words, if what you craft is something that you cannot believe at any level, it's not going to work. You cannot deceive yourself. You cannot con yourself in this exercise. So it has to be something that you can plausibly believe. Let me illustrate. For example, if you have a completely toxic boss, I know you don't have toxic bosses at Google, but they are very prevalent in other areas. But if you have someone and you're absolutely convinced that this toxic boss was sent from the nether regions purely to make your life miserable, and somebody suggests that this person is actually an angel in human shape, you might not be able to accept it. Don't even try. But you might be able to accept an alternate reality where the person is a toxic boss, but hey, you know what? Maybe it's a good thing that I have this person in my life at this stage of my career, because it'll give me a lot of experience dealing with difficult people, and that will be useful for me. Fine. You can work with that. So all clear about that? So the 2 things are, got to construct an alternate reality, got to be better than the one you're presently using, got to be one that you can plausibly believe at some level. And what do you do after that? I'll tell you after you've constructed that. So you have 10 minutes for that. Go. Okay, folks, sit down. Okay. Quick show of hands from this brief exercise. How many of you at least got an insight? Hey, maybe there's a different way of looking at whatever my problem was. And if you get that, raise your hands if that happened to some of you. Okay, some of you. Here is what you do now, and this is important. When you come up with an alternate reality, and by definition this alternate reality is better than the one you're presently in, what I want you to do is when you walk out of this meeting, start living as if your alternate reality were the reality. When you do that, you're going to find 2 things happen. You're going to get a huge mass of evidence saying, it's not working, it's not working. Ignore that. You're going to find some evidence which says, hey, it is working. Celebrate it. But more than celebrate that, this is extremely important, folks. Record it. Write it down. Now, there's natural laziness that comes into play here. So you say, I'm not going to write it down. I'm going to remember. Trust me, you won't remember. You'll forget. You don't even remember what you had for breakfast this morning. How are you going to remember all of the evidence that you have to look for? Write it down. It's very important. If you consistently write down evidence that your alternate reality is working, you will find over time and you start reviewing what you've written down, you'll find over time that there is a shift, and your alternate reality becomes your new reality. And as you do that, you will find that your life has changed. Slow process, but it's infallible. But it all happens if you record it and if you celebrate it. That's one of the things I want to stress, by the way. These are very powerful exercises, and they will work, but they will only work if you get to the point where these exercises are not exercises you're doing, they become a part of who you are. And as you do that, you will find that gradually they will take over your life. And without realizing it, you will find that you're living in a different world than you were before. Because what most of us don't realize is that when we craft our statement of this is where we are, this is where we're stuck, what we're expressing is the reality of our life. But it is a reality. We don't recognize that it is a reality. We think it is the reality. Or, I really wanted to be a poet, but poets don't eat very well. That's what my parents told me. So I went out and became an accountant instead. And I am not a particularly happy accountant, but I nevertheless make do. But I really wish I was a poet instead. But, I'm getting on in years, and I can't be a poet anymore, and I'm just stuck being an accountant. Is that true? Is that false? It's a reality. It becomes the reality if you define it as the reality. And most of us tend to think in terms of either or. I am an accountant or I am a poet. And if you think about it, there's no good reason why you should be an accountant or a poet. You can be an accountant and a poet. That's one of the things I want to encourage you to do. And once you define your life as, yes, I can do all of these things, then all of a sudden you find ways in which you can do it. And the alternate reality exercise is a very powerful one to get you out of the straitjacket that you have donned. Remember, you donned the straitjacket. Nobody put it on you. Other people did have a hand, culture, your peers, parents, teachers, coaches, everybody around you. But ultimately, they did it with your connivance and with your active participation. So the alternate reality exercise is a great one to get you to break out of that. Okay? All right. Let me share some other tools, and these are very powerful tools. Remember the vision that I outlined when I began my talk? How many of you would like to get to the stage where you honestly love what you're doing so much that you would pay for the privilege of doing it? All of you, right? This is probably the most single question I get in all of the business schools that Professor Rao, I really do want to get there. But the problem is I'm not passionate about anything, at least not that way. Nothing really turns me on. What do I do? How can I find it? And the mistake that most of us make is the same one. We think that our ideal job is out there, and we have to find it. And if we can find it, then life would be great. And invariably, we define our ideal job in terms of a bunch of parameters. Here's how much it pays. It is possible that there are M.B.As who are satisfied with their compensation. I just haven't met any yet. So, whatever the job is, it pays X times what you're currently making. And, here's the type of person my boss is, and here's how big my office is, and here's how deep the carpeting is, and here's how much I travel, and, all the rest of that. You might have 10 or you might have 50, but you have a bunch of parameters. And once I can find that, then, I'll be passionate about my job. Wrong. First of all, that exact concatenation of circumstances does not exist, and if it did exist and you were plugged into it, probably would not take more than 6 months before you were the same sorry, miserable self there as you are where you are. Because one of the things that we have to realize, what we don't, is passion does not exist in the job. It exists in us. And either we find it in us right where we are, or we will never find it. And the best place is you can ignite it inside you right where you are. And the beautiful thing about this is if you ignite the passion inside you right where you are, the external world has a marvelous, mysterious, miraculous way of rearranging itself to suit the new person you're becoming. And to get that process started, I want you to think about two things. Every time you are frustrated, every time you're angry, disappointed, or in some way not happy with what you're doing, two things are always true. Now, this is important, so bear with me. I'm saying two things are always true. And the two things which are always true are, first, you're concentrating exclusively on the 2, 3, or 4 things that are wrong with your job. More precisely, on the 2, 3, or 4 things that you think are wrong with your job, and completely ignoring the 30, 40, or 50 things which are actually pretty good about it. And number 2, you're living squarely in a me-centered universe. Oh, me, poor me, I'm so bright, so talented. Why do I not get promoted instead of that turkey in the next cubicle who is a cretin, but somehow or other he sucks up to bosses, and therefore he's got promoted. Now, how cosmically unfair life is. Oh, me, poor me. You're living squarely in a me-centered universe. It is extraordinarily difficult, as I said before, to live any kind of fulfilled life if you're living in a me-centered universe. It just doesn't happen. There is a way by which you can start transforming what you are and who you do, beginning right now. But the first thing that you have to do is you have to get out of the space from which you are observing. And the way you get out of the space is very simple. Remember what I said? When you are complaining, what you're doing is focusing on the 2, 3, or 4 things that are wrong with your job, or more precisely, what do you think are wrong with the job? Get out of that space. So the way you do that is by taking a notebook along with you at all times and systematically noting down what are the things which are pretty darn good about your job. That happens to be particularly easy with, at Google. All you got to do is look around and say, gee, I get all of this food for free. I can tell you there are many companies where you don't get food for free, you don't get massages, you don't have the gorgeous weather that you have. There's a bunch of stuff that you can be grateful for. And there's other stuff that will come up. Maybe all of your colleagues are terrible, but there's some who are actually pretty good to hang out with. Make a note of that. Maybe all of your customers are pains in the you-know-what, but there are some who are a real pleasure to deal with. Make a note of that. As you start doing that, you will find that there is an enormous amount you discover. Hey, this is something to be grateful for. The act of doing this moves you to a different space. And from that space, you take the next step, and the next step is pick any one of these things that you came up with, which are good, which is important to you and significant for the company. And simply come up with a 1-month project in which you are going to increase that component in your professional life. For example, if you find that you're dealing with customers and some of them are really, really, really a pleasure to work with, you might say, how do I get more customers like that? Or you might say, how do I transform my relationships with all customers to be like this? Your call. But whatever it is, you'll come up with something which, this is important to me, this is significant for the company, and for 1 month I'm going to give myself a project to how do I increase this part of it in my life. And every day you're going to do something to help you accomplish that. It's wonderful if you can do it first thing in the morning, but if you can't do it first thing in the morning, do it any time, but do something every day. At the end of the month, evaluate where you are. Either you've succeeded in your project or you haven't. If you haven't, it's okay to give yourself more time. It's not okay to give yourself more time if you didn't accomplish anything because you sat on your duff and did nothing. That's not acceptable. But if you did something every day and you still need more time, give yourself more time. At the end of a year, you will have completed anywhere between 3 and 6 such projects, each one of which will have increased something in your job that you truly like, that you're turned on by, and which is significant to the company. And you will find that you're no longer in the job that you were. It has changed. And as you do that, you will find that your entire professional life has changed, and you will find that your ideal job has sprung up around you. Whether it'll happen in the organization you're with, whether it'll happen somewhere outside is something I cannot predict, but it absolutely will happen. Because that leads us to another point that I want you to bear in mind. Our notion of how to fix the world is we've got to go out and do something. The world is all cockeyed. It does not conform to my expectations. I have to fix it. We're always busy fixing something. In fact, I will bet that many of you right now are in the process of trying to fix somebody in your life. Raise your hands if you're trying to fix someone. Parents, bosses, spouses. I even known people who want to fix their pets. How much luck have you had trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed?
Zero.
Not a whole lot, right? Zero is very close to it. Let me suggest, and by the way, that's a model. The model is if I fix someone, if I can get my husband to stop being messy and wash dishes some of the time and so on, then life's going to be better. You'll find something else. And first of all, it's extremely unlikely that's going to happen too. So. The best way to fix something outside, I know it's counterintuitive, but is to fix what's between your ears. You will find that as you start fixing something between your ears, the external world miraculously starts fixing itself in ways that you couldn't even have imagined. But what we do is we're always focused outward. This is how we want things. And it's a very ineffective way of trying to cope with that problem. It just doesn't work that way. Because in the West, what we're all stuck in, is the model of frantic doing. And in the model of frantic doing, essentially what happens is there's something out there that I don't like, and we have to change it, and the way to change it is I've got to go off and do something. I want a job, and I don't have a job, so that's easy. I go to the internet or register on all these job hunting sites. I find out who friends are who potentially know employers, so I've got to beat up on them. I've got to send so many resumes, set myself a target of get so many informational interviews a week, get so many interviews a week, and if I do all of that frantic activity, then eventually I'll get a job. I'm not in a relationship and I want to be in a relationship. That's easy. I start looking up people who can introduce me to potential dates. By the way, if I'm in that situation, the world basically revolves into three types of people. Potential dates, people who can introduce me to potential dates, or irrelevant. So if I do this, if I go to the internet sites, if I register, if I join museums, hiking, activity clubs of various kinds, and I keep going out on blind dates set up for me, eventually I'll land up with someone and I'll be in a relationship. That's a model of frantic doing. It frequently doesn't work because you do land up with someone and you find that it's not very satisfactory anyway. You land up in a job that you're completely unhappy with. And is very, 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 very stressful. There is an alternative to that. And the alternative to that is the model of calm being. And in the model of calm being, what you do is spend a great deal more time becoming clear about exactly what it is you want, why it is you want that, and this is particularly important. How is it that you're getting what you want is somehow, in some way, of greater good to a greater community? And it's your job to engineer that so that whatever it is you want is, in fact, of greater good to a greater community. And as you become clear about that, you will find that in many instances it appears. I'm not saying you don't have to take any action. I am saying that you have to do much less of this than you think. Things kind of evolve around you. Because one of the things that I would like to stress on you is there are two things we're always doing, and that's what comprises our life. We're always telling stories to ourselves, and we're always going on journeys. Think about it. Your entire life, right now, the reality that you're experiencing is because something happened to you and you told a story about it to yourself, and you're constantly reinforcing that story. It's important. Think about it. And very often, you don't realize that the stories that you're telling yourself are actually hurting you. I'll give you a concrete example. There was one of my students who had a number of issues she was dealing with. She was socially inept. She couldn't hold down a job, had a very short attention span, was employers frequently commented that she was abrasive, arrogant, etc., and real issues. And she had some pretty traumatic things happen to her in her past, including childhood abuse and a bunch of illness and a bunch of other stuff. And the story she used to tell herself is, well, I know I get angry, but I had horrible things happen to me as a child, and it's as a consequence of that I have a nasty temper, and I can't relate to people, and I can't be in a relationship, and so on. And shortly after she took the course, she suddenly realized these are all just stories. And I can change the story I tell myself. So instead of telling herself that she had all of these problems because of what happened to her in her distant past, she said, well, what happened to me is that I had a set of experiences that most people cannot even conceive. As a result of that, I have an appreciation of the depths of life and people that others can't, and therefore, this has made me stronger because I can understand matters which others can't. And therefore, I'm in a better position to empathize with others, to hold down a job, to experience life than others do. And the moment she started telling herself a different story, it took about 6 months or so for her to make a radical transformation in her life. All of you can do that too, because your entire life right now, everything, including the reality that you are experiencing, is a set of stories that you have told yourself and are telling yourself. And when you explicitly recognize that these are the stories that you're telling yourself, and maybe some of the stories that you're telling yourself are not particularly helpful, and you start making a change, you can literally rewrite your past. And as you're doing that, recognize that you are always going on a journey. You came here to attend this talk, you went on a journey. You watch 24, you go on a journey. Anybody here watch 24? If you watch 24, you go on a journey where there are bad people who are trying to do horrible things to the United States of America, generally involving enormous loss of life, and there's only one person who can save the country, and this person has to take a bad guy and tie him to the wheel of a steering wheel of a car and break all of his fingers so he can find out the identity of the next bad guy, and so go on down the chain, and eventually he'll save the country. So that's the place you're going to. Do you watch Desperate Housewives? You go to a place where 40-something housewives have affairs with 19-something gardeners, and while their husbands are having affairs with whoever, but that's the place you go to. Ask yourself, and by the way, neither good nor bad, nor right or wrong. We're not getting into that, but simply ask yourself, these journeys that you take, do they take you to places that you want to go to? Do you huddle around the water cooler or the coffee machine talking about, how terrible your boss is and what's the latest horrible thing he did and what you'd like to do to that person? You're going on a journey. We're always going on journeys. Simply ask yourself, is this journey taking me to a place where I want to spend time? And as you do that, you will find that there are many times you're taking journeys which take you to a place which is not uplifting, which does not bring out the best in you, which in fact frequently appeals to a part of you that you would rather not have appealed to. And as you become aware of that and you just ask yourself a simple question, is this a journey I want to take? You'll find that you stop going on so many unwanted journeys. And as you stop going on unwanted journeys, you can start selecting, this is a place that I do want to go with. And as you do that, you will find that your life transforms itself. It all boils down to, as you go on these journeys, what you're doing is you're becoming aware of your mental chatter. And you're redirecting your mental chatter. And as you redirect your mental chatter, it very gradually redirects and shapes your life. It's really as simple as that. The core of my course is we live in some set of circumstances that we define as this is the reality, and big parts of it we don't like. What I encourage you to find, and actually I don't do that, I let you discover it for yourself, is this is not the reality. This is a reality. Our life is a construct. We're all living in the matrix. And what we can do, eventually I hope we can get out the matrix altogether, and that is possible. But until we get out of the matrix altogether, at least we can construct a better, more humane, more pleasant matrix to live in, and that we can start immediately. And the way you do that is by becoming aware of it, by becoming aware of how you go about constructing it, and then deconstructing it and reconstructing parts of it, and this is a never-ending process. So that's what my program is all about in a nutshell. So I'm going to stop now, and we have time for some questions, if you have any. Yep.
Is NLP one of the foundations of this?
It's not one of the foundations, but we're all drawing from the same well, so there is a lot of similarity. But it is not explicitly a foundation, no. Yep.
You said you drew from various spiritual and cultural traditions, but you didn't mention what they were?
All of them, literally. There are, if you go into, I'm a Hindu, so obviously I do draw from that, but I've drawn from Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, especially mystic strains, from Sufism, from Judaism. The book that was distributed to you, if you go back to that, there's some 30 pages of readings, and there are multiple readings from practically every major religious tradition. So, and you will find that there is a lot of commonality in practices, especially the mystical practices, across all of them.
So one more question, and then we can stay up here after for anybody who has more questions in the back.
I just want to offer on behalf of the alumni, those if you'd like to know what it's like to go through Professor Rao's course, one scoring some cases twice, and you're very welcome to ask us. Professor Rao, would it be good if I ask the alumni to just raise their hands?
Oh, absolutely. No, alumni, please raise your hands. So you can. One thing I would like to do, by the way, and this is, if you would like to start working on your life according to the program, you all have a copy of the book. It is an excellent idea for you to form groups. And the ideal size group would be 5, but it works from anywhere from 3 to 7. Good idea for you to meet on a regular basis, at least once a month, and go through the exercises in the same order and compare notes on what worked, what didn't work, and so on. That kind of is a support group. And that is mentioned in the very first chapter. So if any of you are interested in doing that, then good idea for you to try to form a group and huddle right now. So,
thank you very much. Let's thank Srikumar for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.